Can't do that with a hoplite shield. It won't go that far.
But can the hoplite shield, can it also be used to, like, as an offensive
You
weapon
absolutely
as well?
would use it that way. I mean, it's always depicted that way. I mean, hoplites are always depicted essentially protecting themselves by raising this thing up to make a sort of glasses, right? To make a sort of slanted armor. But obviously you can try to use that also to try and do a shield bash, I guess, with the side. But this is...
I would like to explain, to say one thing now, because I always hear it's mostly historians, occasionally reenactors, but it's mostly historians that tell you, oh, and you can use the scutum to hit someone in the nose. Yeah, and you can use the Greek shield as well to hit someone in the face. Yeah, and you can use this Kermit the Frog book to smack someone in the face. And you can use this iPhone to smack someone in the head. And you can use this Xbox controller. You hold it like this, right? This is going to be the business end. You take your nice swing. Wait, I need to demonstrate. You take a nice swing. You tell them, hey, look, Julius Caesar. Then they turn around, boom, smack them with this right in the temple. So yeah, I would like to underline to all historians out there, that you can use any solid object as a weapon. It's not the discovery that oftentimes people, and it's not even them, I have nothing against them, man, but I've heard people telling it like they had rediscovered the wheel. They're like, oh, you could use the shield to smack someone in the face. And you could use the floppy disk from my Amiga 500 to smack someone in the face. Probably not very effective, but the level of effectiveness of that smacking in the head will be proportional to the growth in size and weight of the object that you're using to smack them in the said face.
Something that's debated among reenactors, because some of them have tried it, they say you can't do it. Others will say, oh, you're too tight in this formation to be able to use that effectively. It is much more of a defensive weapon, I think, than the scutum, which has this sort of attested sort of practice of being used as a way to fight, as a way to drive the enemy.
It's two different kind of uses of weapons, isn't it? I mean, there's no getting away from, I mean, the Roman imperial soldier, a most feared unit, I would say at the time, on the military battlefield. But
unless they meet an elephant. Yeah.
Unless they, well, yes, exactly. But I mean, what would you say about it? It's two different types of weapons, main weapons, whereas the Roman legion soldier is using a sword, which feels quite different to so many years previously in ancient warfare, where the spear is the main weapon of choice.
The spear is king, right? That's the kind of idea that you get. And it's important to note, as you say, about the psychology of facing these weapons, of encountering them. I mean, they have the expression, obviously, we take conquered by the sword. Their phrase is aikmalotos, conquered by the spear. Right? Taken by the spear is their expression for conquest. So the spear is the sort of iconic weapon that you would use. And when they talk about the danger of battle, metaphorically, they can talk about a storm of spears. They can talk about what you do in battle is face the spears. That is essentially the function of an infantryman. And so in that sense, like, the psychology of it is really all deciding. It's like, which weapon do you think is the most sort of awe-inspiring, essentially? Which weapon?
Yeah, no, I like, as I say, I do like Roel Kanijndijk, and it's the way he explores and goes deeper. When it comes to the psychology of combat in classical antiquity, rather than focusing on, oh, this is a terror weapon, they say that of the longbow, the terror weapon of the Middle Ages. Fine, it's a fine point. I'm not going to disagree with it. I am more interested, however, in reading those sources that we have from ancient Greece and from ancient Rome, that deal actually with the psychological responses that soldiers had before the clash of battle. That, when we actually discuss psychology of combat, is what really interests me the most. And there are some sources that mention, for instance, that right before fighting into battle, the men, the young men in fact, but the men that were hoplites in ancient Greece would bite their lips. We are told about that. They would rub their heels sometimes. So imagine that you're standing, maybe you lift a little bit with your right leg and start rubbing the back of your heel against your calf. That's described in the sources. And these are physical responses to obviously anxiety, and they are self-soothing behaviors, and they can be studied psychologically, and it really creates a connection, because often when we imagine them, we imagine these battle hardened tough guys, which they were. I mean, particularly if compared to the likes of me and regular people that have an everyday life and whatever, but they were still humans, and a lot of them were young. So yes, we have this exact descriptions of the type of fidgeting and fiddling that clearly are showing a response to stress, and it's in the sources. So when we talk about the psychology of combat, that's what I'm more interested in, rather than thinking, oh, the bow is a terror weapon, the spear is a terror weapon. Yeah, every weapon is a terror weapon. It's not like being smacked in the forehead with a mace is less terrifying than being stabbed with a spear. But I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying, just wanted to add, since the idea of psychology in combat was mentioned, then we do have sources. Obviously, he's 100% aware of it since he's a professional, and they tell us about it, and it's fascinating. It's a way to counter cognitive load of the moment before the clash with your enemy.
And do you think of as the default? If you were to grab any weapon and fight, what is it that you go for? In the Greek mind, this is absolutely going to be these long spears, because that is how you can inflict terrible wounds while staying at a safe distance.
But that is also the thing. I remember talking to a reenactor, but also someone who works at the Kalkriese Museum in Germany, the Valor Museum, where it's theorized, and there's a lot of evidence for it, that was one of the battles of the Battle of the Teutoburg Forest. And he was talking about the use of potentially keeping one of your pylons back, not throwing them all, because you have that more distance. And I guess there is still that mindset of keeping distance, but at the same time, it's a different psychological mindset to a Roman legionary soldier.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is always, like, reenactors are always trying to figure out, what's the best weapon, what's the most effective way of using it. And obviously, there's a whole sort of YouTube discourse about this kind of thing where they try and test it out.
Here I am.
The thing is, ancient sources don't talk about it that way, right? They don't necessarily care about what happens in one-to-one fights, because that's not how you win battles.
Right.
You win battles by overwhelming the enemy's psychological resistance, essentially, their willingness to stay in that fight. And so it is, in a sense, a lot more important to be scary than to be sort of the most effective or the optimized warrior. And in that sense, I do think that, first the Macedonian pike phalanx, and then later the Roman legionary, they had an edge over many of their enemies because they were in a way terrifying.
That's when we talk about.
I would like to add to that. This is one of the components that now the historian is mentioning, of people who are scared of you. For instance, the Mongols, we know, who used a lot of that sort of psychological tactic. Your ability to be effective in hand-to-hand combat as a unit. I mean, the Romans trained like maniacs, so that had to have been also extremely central from the perspective of a Roman, not just looking scary. In fact, to me, that's more important than looking scary. I would put it an edge above. Professional warrior soldiers that know that drill, that fight a lot, that have a physique coming from training, swimming. That's what the sources suggest to me. I agree with him, not necessarily one-to-one. You want them to be able to be effective as a cohesive unit, so I do agree with him partially. This idea you gotta look scary, though, yeah, it's part of it. I just wouldn't put it that high. It's just one extra brick as we build the wall of success and effectiveness in combat. But when it comes to the Roman, it's not just that. It's also the incredible professional tacticians, the legati, the generals, the overall professionalism of the armies, which was one of the main differences between Rome and Greece, is that Rome was more professional. And Rome was more professional than anything up until the modern period, by the way. The Roman legions were less technologically advanced than medieval armies, but they were more professional. And last but not least, the Romans had logistics and a massive economic backbone that also supported the armies. They could field more men. They could go in a lot of different places. They were very well coordinated. There is a lot that goes into why the Romans were so effective. There's a lot of things.